Hello, it's Connie from Faff Designs. Welcome to my YouTube channel. This week we're not going to be painting furniture. I am going to paint a vase. So I found this picture on the internet of a vase, really beautiful but quite expensive. I picked this one up from a charity shop for a couple of quid. It was not a lot of money at all. Love the shape, but this is pretty ugly. So I'm going to try and make my own version of this with Dixie Belle products and hopefully cover up that ugliness and make it pretty again. Okay, I don't actually do a lot of small items when I paint, mainly because I just love painting furniture. However, what I didn't mention at the start of this is that I'm actually going to be using the new Terra Clay Paint from Dixie Belle on this vase. And when I try a new paint, I do like to use it on smaller items first because it doesn't seem as overwhelming, and you also get the satisfaction of completing something fairly quickly rather than, you know, sort of dedicating quite a lot of time on larger projects. So that's what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be using the brand new clay paint from Dixie Belle to try and reproduce that image that I showed at the very beginning. So I'm just starting off by giving this a really good scrub with Dixie Belle's White Lightning. Then I rinsed it and left it to dry outside. So as you can see, it's got some quite ugly Roman numerals around the top of this vase, and I'm going to cover those up. They're actually slightly indented into the vase, and the rest of the vase has got a sort of a textured finish on it, which I actually quite like. It's just those Roman numerals are not the one. So I'm just taking a little bit of sandpaper and scuff sanding those shinier, glossier Roman numerals because I'm going to attempt to fill them in with Dixie mud. So I have my Dixie mud in white. This actually comes in 3 different colours. You can get it in black, brown and white, and it can be used as a filler. You can also do raised stencils with it, create texture, lots of different effects, but today I'm going to use it to try and fill in those Roman numerals that I'm not that fond of. So I'm just taking my hand and just basically smearing it into the places that I want to kind of even out, and I'm going to try and create a very similar texture to the rest of the vase. So I'm working in fairly small sections because I don't want the Dixie mud to dry before I've had a chance to kind of try and make it a similar texture to the rest of the vase. So I'm just using a premium chip natural bristle brush. So these bristles are quite stiff, and all I'm doing is stippling the surface of Dixie mud when it's wet to try and recreate that textured finish that is on the rest of the vase. So when you are using Dixie mud or filler or a texture additive, sometimes if you do need to build it up quite a lot or apply it quite thickly, it's best to do it in 2 thinner layers rather than try and apply 1 layer really thickly. That's because the drying time will obviously take longer if it's a thick layer. Also, what can happen is as it dries, it starts to kind of crack, and you might find that it falls off if you do apply it too thickly. So although I am trying to recreate that texture now, I am well aware that I will probably have to do 2 passes of the Dixie mud just to try and get rid of those Roman numerals that I hate so much. So I just followed that process around the rest of the jar, the vase I should say, just moved it around and stippled it before it had chance to dry. Dixie mud does dry relatively quickly, so I didn't want it to dry before I had chance to kind of make that textured effect. Okay, so I left this to sit for approximately an hour. Bearing in mind it is very warm here in the UK at the moment, so it dried super quick. And then I just went over and applied a second layer of Dixie mud, just in the areas where it sunk a little bit or is a little bit low, in the areas that I just wanted to basically fill it in a little bit more. And then when the second coat had dried, I just went over it very lightly with a sanding pad just to knock down the higher points of the texture. Okay, so I had a texture that I was fairly happy with, and it kind of blended in with the rest of the vase. So now for the exciting bit. This is Terra Clay Paint. This is a brand new paint from Dixie Belle. I am still learning about it, so this is more of an experimental piece. This is not me telling you how to use the paint, because with Terra Clay Paint there really aren't any rules. It's a very, very versatile paint. It's very thick, it's water based, you can use it watered down, you can use it as it is. It holds texture amazingly well, and it's really a paint for artisan finishes. So if you want to do some hand painting, or if you want to do a sort of really layered look or blending, it lends itself really, really well to those kind of faux finishes and artistic finishes. The colour that I'm using here is called Desert Tan. It's a very beautiful muted taupe. And as you can see, I'm just stippling it all over the vase to give me a base colour. Considering that I am not a fan of neutrals, this colour has literally got me hooked. I absolutely love this colour. It's really, really beautiful. As the clay paint dries, it does turn lighter, considerably lighter. But when you apply your top coat, that then kind of saturates the colours again, and you will get that richness to the colour. I don't actually have the Terra wax at the moment, so I am going to use a different top coat with this, but I'll show you that later on. Okay, so that is one coat of Desert Tan applied as a base colour. Then before it completely dried, I then went in with Moonbeam, which is a white, and stippled that on with a French tip brush in the centre of the vase, just to create a little bit of dimension. So obviously I'm trying to replicate the vase that I showed you right at the beginning. And that had sort of like a paler band around the centre, but it was sort of blended out. So I'm just stippling it in. And the thing with clay paint is that it reactivates with water, even if it's completely dried. So this was drying super quick because it was being absorbed into the Dixie mud that I'd done obviously as a previous step. And it was just sucking all the moisture out. So you can see where it looks a bit patchy, that's actually it drying out. But a quick spritz with my continuous mister, and that completely reactivates the paint and allowed me to blend the Moonbeam into the Desert Tan. So as you can see, I have just taken that Moonbeam around a sort of band in the centre, and then without adding any more product on my brush, I am just blending that out in a stippling motion towards the top of the vase and towards the bottom of the vase. And then I'm adding a little bit more Moonbeam in the centre just to intensify that band of white and give it a little bit more contrast. The thing with this paint is, what I've found so far, and I've only used it a couple of times, is that it is really, really easy to move the paint around And kind of, if you mess up or put a little bit too much paint down, or you don't like that particular blend that you're doing, it's really, really easy to reactivate the paint with a little spritz of water to move it around or erase what you've done. So it is really, really satisfying, really lovely paint to achieve those faux and artistic finishes with. Okay, so you can see that it is kind of blending out how I wanted it to, and when I step away, because I'm actually blocking the light out at the moment, but when I step away and you can see the vase in better light, it actually looks really lovely as it is. Really, really pretty, very subtle, and it already looks a lot more expensive than what it did when it started out. There you go, I've moved my huge head out of the way, and you can see in natural light it actually looks really pretty as it is. But we're not going to stop there, because the vase that I referenced at the start had a line of sort of very intense dark black, almost sort of bluey black colour across the bottom. I'm using the colour Onyx, and that is a black, and let me tell you, this black is very pigmented. All of the colours are super, super rich and pigmented in this range. A little bit of this black goes a long way. It's a very strong colour. So I am basically stippling it on in exactly the same way as I did the moonbeam across the centre, but I'm just using it around the very, very base of the vase. And I'm again just using exactly the same technique as I did before. I'm just blending it into that desert tan, which is the sort of taupe colour. So I'm just blending it out into that to give a soft line. So then with a very, very small amount of product, I'm actually taking product off the lid of the tub and just taking the majority of it off my brush onto the drop cloth that I've got down underneath the vase. I'm just dry brushing around the very top of the rim of the vase, just to give it a little bit more definition around the top. And then, if we refer back to the vase that I got off, the image that I got off the internet, it had kind of black splats on it. So I've just added some water onto my premium chip brush, and I'm dipping that quite damp premium chip brush into my black paint, which is called Onyx, and I'm just splatting it all over the vase. Let me tell you, this was really fun. I splatted that black paint on my staging wall behind. I managed to get it as far as the other wall on my right hand side, and I've had to repaint all of my staging wall because I got a little bit carried away with it, but it was a lot of fun to do this, and I'm just experimenting really with how best to get that kind of black sort of speckled effect over the piece. A little bit of water helps, and then I'm literally just taking my finger and pulling the bristles back, and when they release, it's kind of just leaving a very fine spray of black paint on the vase. And I just kept turning the vase around and positioning my paintbrush in slightly different angles so that not all the splats were going in the same direction. And to be honest, I probably should have ended it here, but I didn't, because it's me. So I went back to the base of the piece and added more Onyx on the base, just to intensify that black. I also took it up slightly higher on the vase. Obviously the shape of the vase that I had in the image was a rounder, shorter vase. Mine's quite long and tall, so I think it just the Onyx needed to be brought up a little higher, up the vase a little bit, just to kind of balance it out. And like I said, because it's me, like I should have left it there, but I didn't. I wanted more splats and bigger splats. So I got a paper plate. I added some of the Onyx onto it, and then I added some water. So it was a watered down version of the paint. So the paint is really, really thick. And obviously adding water is going to make it a thinner solution. So I saturated my premium chip brush in this watered down solution. And you can see it on there. There's not a huge amount of paint, but it obviously a little bit goes a long way. And then I decided to splat. And this worked very well. A little too well, actually. But I was having so much fun. I just went to town on the splats, and I think I just took it a little bit too far. But it's a vase. It was from a charity shop. It was a couple of quid, and it's all about experimenting at this stage with the paint and seeing what it does and how it works. So I wasn't really concerned. And again, that goes back to my point of why I have these small items to experiment on, because if it really is that bad, I can just paint over it again. It's not a problem. And then I just went just a little bit too far, and decided to just, oh, there it is. That's what happened. Whoops. I knew I went too far. I splatted the paintbrush instead of using my finger and made a huge black mark. So if I was bothered about that huge black mark, what I would have done is just added some more of the original colour, the base colour, and basically covered it up and sort of, you know, blended it in with those paints that I'd originally used in the first place. But I'm really not that too fussed about this one. It's just an experiment. Like I say, I'm not teaching you how to use this paint. I'm showing you the process that I went through to try and get some, you know, experiment with some faux finishes, and just experiment with how the paint works. So, like I mentioned, I don't actually have Terra Wax here in the UK yet. Hopefully I will have it soon. So I am just sealing this with Clear Coat Flat, which does work quite well, and you can just see it bringing those colours back to that saturation and that intense colour that they had when I first applied them. And I've just turned it around and you can see that massive black splat. Just ignore that. We'll pretend that black splat never happened. We'll pretend it's not there, and I'll just photograph it with the black splat at the back. Although someone might like the black splat, but I just went a little bit too far. Just getting a little bit carried away in the moment there. So all I did is 2 coats of clear coat flat. I'll get my words out. Left it to dry, and then I put half a tree in it and did some staging. And there we go. So obviously I've turned the vase around, so the black splat is at the back. But there we go. I've zoomed out a little bit and you can see the half a tree that I cut down to stage it with. So, do I hate the vase? No. Is it the best thing I've ever made in the world? Also no. Did I have fun? Absolutely. Do I love the paint? Yes. The possibilities are endless with this paint. It's going to be a really arty, fun paint to play with. There are no rules. As you can see from here, you can create loads and loads of different finishes. So I look forward to seeing what people create with it, and I also look forward to creating more things in the future. So thank you for watching the video and my little kind of playing around with this paint this week. Make sure you're subscribing to my YouTube channel.